Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked On Wolves. Today on the show, how the Timberwolves have performed against the zone lately. Why are teams still testing the Wolves with zone defense? It's all coming next.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. Happy Thursday, everybody. Happy Christmas Day to those of you celebrating Christmas here today. Of course, Wolves Nuggets tonight, the final game of a 5-game NBA slate here on Christmas Day. The Wolves play tonight at 9:30 Central against the Nuggets. We'll talk about that later. We'll preview the matchup, the third time we've seen Denver so far this season. But I want to start today by digging in on something we've seen a lot of the last couple times out against the Bucks on Sunday, against the Knicks on Tuesday, and that's opponents playing zone against the Timberwolves. We'll talk about the trends we've seen, what's worked really well against the zone, because the Wolves performed very well against the Bucks zone, less good against the Knicks, but still fine, and the Bucks did a ton of it. The Knicks did a decent amount of it. So why are teams doing this? What are the different ways Minnesota's exploited teams playing zone defense? And also some notes related to Anthony Edwards and the zone. And we'll get into some Bones Hyland related stuff too. As I've termed it on the YouTube graphic, the Bones Renaissance, which I'm sure there's a better term for it, but the Renaissance of Bones Hyland since Anthony Edwards went out of the lineup with the foot soreness. What that's looked like since Bones has joined. So we'll get into that. Some interesting stuff there related to Ants pairings, what's worked, what hasn't, what has helped with Bones Hyland, or what Bones Hyland has helped with when he's on the floor. So we'll get into that here in a little bit as well before we close by talking Wolves Nuggets. A big thank you off the top for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. All right, let's talk by talking about the zone. We did this a few weeks ago. And I don't recall, there was a series of games where teams were playing the zone a little bit more against Minnesota. And I thought it was important to kind of it's something that they struggled with last year. And going back a couple of seasons, 2 years ago, the zone was just like kryptonite for Minnesota. And now, of course, 2 years ago, they had the league's best defense, and the offense was like 16th or 17th when it was all said and done. It wasn't a very good offense for a team that won 56 games and went to the conference finals, but the defense was so dominant. And remember, Kyle Anderson, Slow-Mo, was the zone buster. They put him at the nail, and he could operate in the middle of the floor and facilitate, was good enough from the paint with his little push shot floater thing that he could keep defenses honest. And then last season, we saw it a little bit less. The Wolves saw less zone, but there was like that collapse against the Bucks where it completely flummoxed Minnesota. They collapsed. It was like they'd never seen a zone before. None of these dudes had played against the zone in high school or college either, apparently, and they just panicked. This year, we started to see a little bit more of it early in the season. Minnesota handled it well, and then it went away for a little while, generally speaking. In fact, up until the last week, when the Wolves have seen double-digit, according to Synergy, double-digit zone defense, double-digit possessions against an opponent's zone defense, the last time that a team played 10 or more possessions of zone against the Wolves in a game, according to Synergy, was the last time the Wolves played Denver on November 15th, so almost 6 weeks ago. Sacramento last week in the game, the Wolves won by 14, played 11 possessions of zone. Milwaukee played 19 on Sunday, and the Knicks played 10 on Tuesday. Again, this is according to Synergy. And honestly, the way they chart things, I didn't go back and chart it myself against their numbers, but it does feel like the Knicks played more than 10 possessions of zone against the Wolves, and I bet Milwaukee played more than 19. But these are charted by Synergy. It's the numbers they're giving us, and if nothing else, it gives us a good snapshot of how often, the frequency with which teams are doing it in general, which games did it happen more often in, and then also the points per possession, which we'll dig in on as well. But Milwaukee did it for 19 possessions against the Wolves, which was pretty easily the most that we've seen any team play zone against Minnesota so far this season. Now, why are teams doing it? It does seem a little weird, considering the Wolves are a good three-point shooting team. Even though they've struggled a little bit more lately from outside the arc, they're still 6th in the NBA in percentage. They're 11th in three-point rate. Like, the Wolves are willing and capable three-point shooters as a team. So that seems a little bit surprising. The only thing I can think of is trying to dare Minnesota to force the ball into Rudy Gobert, because what inevitably happens when teams play zone is Rudy gets left to roam the back line. He's essentially, going from one dunker spot to the other dunker spot on the other side of the paint, looking for the pass, and Minnesota could try and force that in sometimes into a tight window. Rudy, given his hands are, better on lobs for some reason than they are on any other catch. And it like, what's the purpose of the zone at the NBA level? It's not like in college or high school where there's teams who will almost exclusively play zone. It's more about throwing a changeup at the other team, which is why you see teams do it a dozen times in a game is a lot, or you might only see it 2 or 3 times because they're doing it out of timeouts. They're doing it after a made free throw. It's designed to just steal a possession here and there where you're pretty sure you're going to get a stop, because you're going to confuse the other team. They're not going to know. They're not expecting it, right? They're not going to necessarily know how to handle it. It's not like it's a bug, not the feature, usually when it comes to defenses in the NBA. So the reason it's used is to confuse these teams. They think, well, I guess Rudy's kind of open, I'm going to force a pass to him, and you turn it over, or you end up with, ball on the floor, loose ball, whatever. Or maybe like a weird Rudy attempt based on trying to force the ball into him. And that's obviously what teams are trying to do. Or the other piece of that is, depending on the personnel on the floor, like, what's Ant going to do? Is he going to drive into a mess of 3 guys in the mid-range and then try and force a pass to Rudy or force a tough shot? There's no Kyle Anderson. Joe Ingles hasn't been used this year in rotation minutes for Minnesota. Like, there's nobody that's going to necessarily calm things down from the middle of the zone. Now, I say that there's a couple of guys that I want to credit for doing that over the last few games. But I think that's why teams will do this against Minnesota. Another kind of reason why I don't get it, the Timberwolves have been good against the zone this year. Timberwolves are actually number 3 in the NBA in points per possession against the zone. Now, the frequency with which teams play zone against Minnesota is still lower than most teams. They only see it about 2.7% of the time, which is 20th in the league. Okay, so there's 19 teams that see zone more frequently than Minnesota does, which is why it's so interesting that we've seen the uptick here over the last couple of games against the Bucks and Knicks. And the Wolves, incidentally, are 3rd in the NBA in points per possession against the zone. I should also point out, as long as we're talking about the Bucks and the Knicks playing zone against Minnesota, the Bucks are actually the team that plays the most zone. So, like, we should factor that in, right? So, no, Minnesota doesn't see a ton of zone playing against them, but the Bucks do play a lot of zone, period, with and without Giannis. So it's maybe not surprising that they continue to do it, but they play zone more than any team in the NBA, according to Synergy. And sure enough, they did it against the Wolves quite a bit. The Knicks are more middle of the pack. They're 14th in the league in frequency of zone. So it's important to note that is a factor here. But overall against the zone this season, Minnesota's 3rd in the NBA in success. They're 1.2 points per possession against the zone, behind only the Knicks and the Warriors. So the Timberwolves handle zone defenses extremely well this season. Specifically of late, we have to credit Julius Randle. And, that was, I thought, even more in the Milwaukee game. And then against the Knicks, Jaylen Clark had a couple of nice possessions where he basically functioned in the middle of the zone as a bit of a facilitator, which, if you trust his decision-making, that's not a bad spot for him, right? Like, Jaylen Clark's not going to facilitate pick and roll. He's not a super reliable corner 3-point shooter, which is typically what his role ends up being in the Wolves half court. So teams are going to play the zone, stick Jaylen Clark in the middle. I mean, that was the Kyle Anderson thing, right? He's not a threat really from anywhere else on the floor. But if you trust him as a passer, and obviously Slow-Mo is a lot bigger than Jaylen Clark, and he is a better passer, but the coaching staff could look at Jaylen Clark and be like, hey, look, man, we need you on the floor for defense. Why don't you go hang out at the free throw line and be in the middle of the zone? And that worked out pretty well. He made a couple of nice passes, seemed composed. Overall, has made good decisions this year, even in the corners with, like, he made that little teardrop floater against the Knicks as well on Tuesday when he pump faked from the corner, drove, and then shot like a, 8-footer just outside the paint. And he made it. Like, we don't usually see him shoot non-paint twos. We don't see him shoot non-layups and non-corner threes. So perhaps we're seeing a little bit of a diversification of his game. And he did that against the zone against the Knicks on Tuesday. Julius Randle is in my mind, the perfect zone buster, as long as he doesn't get out over his skis, which his decision-making isn't, like, again, comparing him to Kyle Anderson, it's not quite as consistent as Slow-Mo's was, right? But Randle flashing to the elbow makes sense. Randle's really good at the elbows. He's a very good mid-range scorer, super good at drawing fouls there. We know he likes to get to 10 feet and shoot that little fadeaway that's unblockable, gets away with some, or draws some foul calls, gets some and ones. And then also good at finding Rudy underneath, finding spot-up shooters, facilitating from the elbows. Minnesota likes to run these horn sets and kind of mid-post things anyways that gets Randle those touches from 12, 15 feet from the bucket. Julius Randle's a perfect zone buster. He's a good passer. He can play bully ball. He's great in the mid-range. So I think if we see more of this, and again, the Bucks thing was more about matchups or more about what the Bucks do, and the Knicks thing is as much about, I guess I don't really know. I mean, the Knicks do, again, middle of the pack there, but it's not like they do like a crazy amount of it. Be interested to see if we see more moving forward. Now, Denver plays a fair amount. I mentioned earlier, like the last time Minnesota had faced zone for 10 or more possessions in a game, according to Synergy, was November 15th, and it was the Nuggets. The Nuggets are 6th in the NBA in frequency of playing zone on defense, so we may see more of it on Christmas Day against the Nuggets. So keep an eye out for that. And again, I think the Randle and the Jaylen Clark thing, those are reasonable ways to attack the zone if you're the Timberwolves, and I think it's pretty interesting. Also, an Ant note related to the zone, and then I want to get into some of Anthony Edwards' lineups, pairings, some of the stuff we've seen since Ant came back from the injury. We'll do all that here next, and we'll close the show by talking Wolves Nuggets tonight. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends at Prize Picks. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. The holiday season is one of the best times for sports. We got college bowl games. We got big basketball matchups. Got playoff pushes in pro football. It's all happening at once. And while we're all making choices every day, one of the most fun places to make the right call is Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the easiest way to get in on daily fantasy. Just pick more or less on at least 2 player projections, lock in your lineup, and you're in the game. It's simple, fast, and available in 45 states. That includes states like California, Texas, Florida, and Georgia. There's an extra layer of excitement to the holiday sports schedule right around this time of year, especially between Christmas and New Year's. All the college football stuff, too, is massive on top of pro football, on top of all the big basketball games that we're obviously getting on Christmas Day. Creating your lineup on Prize Picks takes less than a minute. The app makes the whole process smooth and intuitive. You can choose from a whole range of unique stats, including fantasy score. For basketball, it's field goals attempted, free throws made, turnovers, whatever fits your strategy. For football, it might be quarterback passing yards, touchdowns, rushing yards, whatever the case might be. It's awesome. Deposits and withdrawals are quick and easy too, and that keeps everything flowing. Download the Prize Picks app today and use the code LOCKEDONNBA to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNBA to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. It's good to be right. Big thank you once again for making Locked On Wolves your first listen of the day. And of course, thanks for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. We could not have done that without you, the loyal listeners. And if you haven't already, go check out our new Everydayer Club. You can get access to an ad-free audio feed for Locked On Wolves, compatible with Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and every other major podcast app. You get an invite to the members-only Locked On Everydayer Club Discord server, which includes a group chat just for listeners of this show and any of your favorite Locked On shows. You can go to LockedOnWolves.supercast.com or tap the link in the show notes to learn more. All right. So Anthony Edwards. The Timberwolves have actually been marginally better with Anthony Edwards off the floor against the zone than they have with him on the floor, which was kind of my final zone note. And I'm not really sure why, other than some of the same issues that Ant's had on and off this year, which is ISOing when maybe he shouldn't ISO, and sometimes ISOing against the zone, allowing the zone to kind of load up doesn't make a ton of sense. I think it depends on the opponent and maybe who's in the zone. Screening the zone can work, which is not something that it may not work in high school. It works in the NBA. You can screen a zone. It also depends on personnel more than anything. And we saw some pretty good screening the zone possessions for Minnesota. If Julius Randle's ball handling, I think that works. You can help get him to the middle of the defense that way as well. But dribble handoffs. Minnesota is not a big pick and roll team. They are a big dribble handoff team, which functions in a similar way. And Ant's so good in dribble handoff situations. I think that's a way. It's obviously different than having Rudy just roam the back line. That's another way Minnesota could attack the zone. I think some of that stuff with Ant on the floor makes more sense than when Ant's off the floor. If Ant's off the floor, put Randle at the nail, put him at the elbow, and just kind of flow the offense through him. If Ant's on the floor, I think you can screen the zone. I think you do more of the dribble handoff. And I don't think it should really throw off how Minnesota actually executes their sets. It's just, it does from a mental standpoint. Like, it's just a wrench being thrown in what the plan was. And so the Wolves just have to get over that in those situations. Speaking of Anthony Edwards, we got to talk about the Bones Renaissance. Bones Hyland now being a member of the Timberwolves rotation and what's changed to allow that to happen. I actually had planned to talk about this last week a little bit, a bit of a different take. I didn't do a show Friday because I didn't have a voice. Obviously, my voice is still not all the way back. If it sounds a little funny, we're not quite there yet. But Friday, I could not talk. And so I saved what I was going to talk about. And I'm going to talk a little bit about it here, this was when Ant was still out, right? He missed a few games with a sore foot. And, Minnesota had a really good performance against Golden State without Anthony Edwards. They won. They made a lot of shots. Nobody's complaining, right? And then they come out and they lose to Memphis. And the half-court offense is just miserable against Memphis without Anthony Edwards. It was, look at the box score and clean the glass. It's a 5th percentile half-court offense execution is what that operation was in the Grizzlies' loss. But, not a whole lot changed. It's just they missed the shots, right? Lack of shot creation, especially with an Ant-less Timberwolves team, is a problem a lot of the time. But ball movement works as long as you make your jumpers. Look at how great the Golden State game was. If shots fall, no one's complaining. The stagnation is what's most concerning. And you look at the pass numbers on NBA.com, on advanced stats on NBA.com or stats.nba.com or whatever it is. The team passes the ball less when Anthony Edwards is on the floor or when he's available. There's just less passes because the ball stops with Ant. There's more isolations. There's more plays where Ant's just the guy pounding the rock into the ground. And that's fine. He's good, right? He's a really good isolation player. He's a good offensive player. But the ISOs have dipped a bit here recently of Ant. And when Ant's out, it forces more of that ball movement. And if the shots fall, it's great. The problem is there's nowhere else to turn if the shots aren't falling. If Dante DiVincenzo is 3 of 11 from 3, and Jaden McDaniels is 0 of 4, and Naz Reid is 1 of 5, you're in trouble. And that happens. And we've seen that swoon from a shooting standpoint. Minnesota was top 3 most of the season in three-point percentage until recently. Now they're 6th. And if there's no Ant, there's nowhere to turn. And that's what we saw in that Memphis loss, a little over a week ago. The non-Ant starting lineup has been fine for the most part. If you look at those non-Ant lineups, so when Conley was healthy and Bones wasn't in the rotation, that lineup was super successful. The starters minus Ant plus Conley, DiVincenzo, McDaniels, Randle, Gobert, a plus 21.9, 90th percentile unit, 89th percentile offensively, 80th percentile defensively. It's great. Then the next version, when Conley and Ant were out, with Bones Hyland in the starting lineup, along with DiVincenzo, McDaniels, Randle, and Gobert, also really good. Just under 100 possessions, so they don't have the percentile ranking on cleaning the glass, but it's a plus 14.3 lineup. The offense isn't quite as good, but the defense is great, weirdly enough, with Bones on the floor and no Mike Conley, which is not what I was expecting. All that to say, the numbers of the lineups without Anthony Edwards overall are good, but the floor is a lot lower. The ceiling's lower and the floor is lower without Anthony Edwards. Because, again, if the open threes aren't falling when there's good ball movement, where do you turn? And that's where Minnesota did turn to Bones Hyland when the offense was not flowing without Anthony Edwards. And Chris Finch was like, all right, what's the next closest thing we have to a dynamic playmaker not named Anthony Edwards? In theory, it's Rob Dillingham. Or, obviously Naz Reid. But in terms of a backcourt player, in theory, it's Rob Dillingham. That hasn't worked out the way that the Timberwolves have envisioned it, or anyone has, or anybody envisioned it, of course. So he turns to Bones Hyland. And Bones has some nice performances, pre Ant's returning from injury. And then even after that, he's been really good. He had the scoring outburst the other night. And then he had the really strong plus-minus game against the Knicks on Tuesday. Let's see, which game was that? It was the Let's see. What game did he have his big scoring night? Oh, it was a Kings game. He had 18 points in 35 minutes. This is, of course, with Ant out. They beat Golden State with no Ant. They beat Sacramento. He scores 18 in 35 minutes against Sacramento with no Conley, no Ant. And then they lose to Memphis, and he scores 12 points on 11 shots. He's 2 of 9 from outside the arc, and it's like, all right, that was cute. Well, it lasted, but long-term Bones Hyland score, high volume scoring is not a winning strategy. He was good against OKC, so was Rob Dillingham. He was decent against Milwaukee, and then he plays 25 minutes in the win over the Knicks and is a plus 24 in a game the Wolves only won by 11, and like nobody else was in that range in terms of a positive plus minus. And so Bones continues to show his what he brings to the table for this team. And I guess the other piece of this is that we're now back to seeing Anthony Edwards play along with another ball dominant guard. Instead of Ant being the de facto point guard, he's playing with a point guard. And whether it's Mike Conley or Bones Hyland, those guys are not Dante DiVincenzo. And we know DiVincenzo's assist rate's up this year, and he's doing a fine job kind of being that secondary facilitator, but Ant's also a secondary facilitator. Neither of these guys are primary point guards. And it's interesting because, like, you can win with Ant being your point guard, but in a perfect world, you've got a higher usage guy that can put pressure on the defense. The balls, the attention's on Ant. The floor is shaded towards Anthony Edwards. Teams are cheating towards Ant. So what do you need to balance the floor on offense? You need somebody like Bones Hyland who's not afraid to attack, the weak side, essentially. And Bones, isn't the best solution. Like, eventually, he's going to turn into a pumpkin if he plays 25 to 30 minutes a night. Bones Hyland is not going to score 17 a night and shoot 40% for three. Like, he's not. It just underscores how important it is that long-term the Wolves get whatever, the fully realized version of Rob Dillingham, the fully realized version, the higher ceiling version, higher floor version of Bones Hyland. And right now, they're trying to cobble that together with what they're getting from Bones, what they want to get from Dillingham, bits and pieces of TJ Shannon. And that has elevated what Ant provides as well. Now, Ant scored 38 against the Knicks. He only had 2 assists. He only had 2 rebounds. He didn't do a whole lot else on the offensive end, but he scored a bunch. And Bones facilitated. And not as much through assist numbers. Hockey assists, again, the plus minus was really good. But it just lifts, rising tide lifts all ships, right? So having that other playmaker, that second side creator for the Timberwolves is huge. And Bones Hyland has been that, and it's elevated Ant. The Ant absence allowed for the aforementioned Bones Assance. And now Anthony Edwards is playing more and better with Bones, with Mike Conley. And now that Conley's come back as well. And Conley had the really good plus minus against the Bucks, right? Like, even though the numbers aren't popping out on the box score, the heavier minutes from Conley and the strong plus minus for Mike on Sunday, the strong plus minus for Bones on Tuesday, that's all, clearly impactful. And his, again, elevated Ant's game as well. All right. Let's close by talking Wolves Nuggets. Wolves Nuggets tonight. We'll preview that matchup. It's round 3 of Wolves Nuggets this season. We'll get to all that here next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends at DoorDash. The season's heating up, and DoorDash has a way to keep fans in their bag the whole way through. Whether you're watching the highlights, the tunnel fits, or just your favorite player or team, DoorDash makes the entire season more fun. Because every player has their bag. With DoorDash, fans have one too. DoorDash keeps your snacks stocked, your gear fresh, and your watch party vibes absolutely on point. There are nights when your team stresses you out, and guess what? DoorDash can be your post-game therapy. Sometimes you just need dessert now. Those late night interviews hit. Suddenly you need chips. Maybe it's at midnight. DoorDash is built exactly for that. If the group chat says pull up, DoorDash makes sure you show up prepared. Snacks, cups, even a phone charger for the friend who's always at 2%. From tip-off to overtime, stay in your bag and order on DoorDash. Get snacks, drinks, gear, whatever gets you through your season, delivered right to your door. DoorDash, in your bag all season long. All right, let's close out by talking Wolves Nuggets. This is the third time Timberwolves have seen the Nuggets this season. They lost. I misspoke on this on the show yesterday. I bet you I thought I forgot they played them a second time. They played them way back, like second week of the season with no Anthony Edwards. And then they lost to them on November 15th. When the Wolves were at full strength, the Nuggets were missing. Who were they missing at that time? Somebody had just gotten hurt. Christian Braun had just gotten hurt. Now, coming into this game, no Christian Braun still for the Nuggets. He's been out for a month and a half or so. No Cam Johnson. Scary moment the other night. Looked like it could have been an ACL. Ended up being a bone bruise, sprained knee. So no Cam Johnson, no Christian Braun, and also no Aaron Gordon still for the Nuggets. He's been out for a little while as well. So, three of their top, 6 players? And, that matters. That's significant. Now, the Nuggets have still been winning because Jokic is Jokic. They just lost to the Mavs by a single point on, Sunday, I think? Wait, no, not Sunday. Today's Thursday. It was Tuesday. So no Cam Johnson, no Christian Braun, no Aaron Gordon. They did lose to the Mavs by 1 the other night. They lost the Rockets a couple nights ago. So they lost 2 out of 3. Sandwiched on a big win over the Jazz. Prior to that, though, they'd won 6 straight. They've beaten some good teams. They beat the Rockets during that stretch. They barely beat the Hawks. They've blown out some bad teams. They have lost overall to the Mavs twice in the last 3 weeks, though. And they lost to the Spurs as well. Obviously, the Spurs are good. The Mavs, not so much. They have some silly losses in there, too. The Kings, the Bulls. But all that to say, Minnesota's due for a win against Denver. Now, this isn't exactly the same team that we saw the Wolves beat in the playoffs a couple years ago or dominate, frankly, in the regular season last year. Jamal Murray is Jamal Murray again. Like he's basically bubbled Jamal Murray at this point. He's been phenomenal so far this season, and he erupted in game 1 against Minnesota at the very start of this season. He had 43 in that game on 29 shots, was really, really good. A plus 30 in a game the Nuggets won by 13. Then the next time out, he was really good again, 23 points, took him a few more shots to do it, but he had 12 assists to only 3 turnovers in an 11-point win on November 15th. And of course, Jokic is incredible. Jokic had a triple-double in both games, and of course, he's averaging a triple-double this year too. So, that's maybe not surprising. This matchup, if you look at comparing these two teams, Denver's still the number 1 offense in the league. They have the best effective field goal percentage. They don't turn the ball over that much, which is interesting considering some of the stuff Jokic tries. They don't turn it over very often. Really, the only thing they don't do is offensive rebound that much. And that's basically Jonas Valanciunas coming off the bench for them. He's like the main guy you got to worry about when it comes to offensive rebounding. Beyond that, and obviously, Jokic to an extent, but nobody else is really offensive rebounding for this team. They don't play at that fast of a pace, but it's the Jokic factor, right? It's the selective fast break opportunities that can crush you in transition. And they get such good shots the first time around that they don't necessarily need to worry too much about getting those second chance opportunities. So very different than a Knicks game on Tuesday that I warned on the preview Tuesday. Hey, look, they're going to crash the glass. They're going to look for second chance opportunities, especially a short-handed Knicks team. Sure enough, they got 18 offensive rebounds. Karl-Anthony Towns had a ton early. That was an issue. I don't anticipate that being a big factor, although Valanciunas always gives Gobert some trouble. So in his minutes, I'd look out for that. But for the most part, that's not really Denver's game, right? That's not what they're trying to do. On the flip side, they're not a very good defensive team. As of right now, Cleaning the Glass has them 19th in the NBA in defense, which is crazy considering they're 4th in differential, and they have the 5th best record in the NBA. But they don't force any turnovers, and they allow opponents to shoot well from the field. Like they're not great at contesting outside the arc. They're really good at defending without fouling, and they're good at limiting second chance opportunities. This is yet another case, and I said this against the Knicks in the Knicks game too. If Minnesota can find themselves, they can generate decent looks. They have obviously got to knock them down. They don't need to worry too much about crashing the glass for second chance points. They shouldn't focus too much on getting to the line because Denver's good at defending without fouling. But Denver also doesn't force turnovers. So pass the ball until you find a good shot. Maybe push the pace a little in transition. Force the issue because Denver's not going to jump passing lanes. They're not going to gamble. They're going to stay home. They're going to try and set up a zone after makes, probably, a dozen times in this game. So when given the opportunity, push the pace. Try to generate open three-point looks. Win the three-point battle. You got a shot at winning the free throw battle. And maybe a shot at winning the second chance opportunities, a second chance point battle but I wouldn't focus on those things in this game. I would just focus on getting quality shots in the half court, making threes when you get the opportunity in transition and against the zone. And that means Ant's going to have to play well. DiVincenzo is going to be key in this game. And then some of those ancillary players, your Mike Conleys, your Jaylen Clarks, are going to have to knock down open threes. Nas has to hit from the corners. That's going to be really important in this game against Denver. And this is an important game also in terms of the Western Conference. Like we talked about this the other day on the show. Right now, Minnesota's I think they're only a game and a half behind Denver. Just a game and a half behind Denver for third in the West. They're in a virtual tie with the Lakers for fourth. LA has the tiebreaker, and Minnesota has one more loss than them, but the Wolves have one more win. So the Wolves are fifth. But if they beat the Nuggets, and the Lakers lose their next game, the Wolves would jump the Lakers. They'd be in fourth, and they'd only be a half game behind Denver for third in the Western Conference. It's obviously very early to be so worried about exactly where they are in the West. But if they can win the last two against Denver, both in Denver, then they at least tie the tiebreaker. Like there's not if Denver wins one of these two, they'll have the season tiebreaker, which could matter down the stretch this season. And Minnesota has to try and gain some ground with some of these injuries. Like Aaron Gordon and Christian Braun are both going to come back pretty soon. And so as long as they're out, Timberwolves have to gain some more ground on Denver in the Western Conference. So an important game for that reason as well. All right. I think we will have a live postcast tonight. We'll have Luke and Jack live on Locked On Wolves on YouTube and also right here on the audio feed after the live show. They'll put it up here at Locked On Wolves. I'll be back on Friday. We'll do a post-game pod following the late game, a 9:30 Central tip on ESPN and ABC, Denver and Minnesota from Denver. So I'll have a show again tomorrow. So, check out the postcast tonight or tomorrow and then my show tomorrow as well to break down this game. A big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. A reminder that if you need a last-minute holiday gift, or maybe someone keeps asking what you want, make it easy. Ask for the Everydayer Club. Ad-free episodes of this show, exclusive Discord server access, and more. Subscriptions can be gifted through LockedOnWolves.supercast.com. Of course, this show, Locked On Wolves, is part of that very same Locked On Podcast Network, your local experts on all the biggest stories. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.